Justice, episode 11, Tag Nadir. I believe that's how you say it. These the titles for this stretch is kind of weird. So it's your boy Icon with some DC TV, and we's back, baby. So in this episode, there is chaos. There is definitely chaos, and we're still doing the Vandal Savage show because Vandal Savage. Well, they're still doing like the narration, talking about all the things that Vandal Savage went through. And when we last saw Vandal Savage, he had basically sunk Atlantis under the deep. We learned that, well, unfortunately, I did say this because I was confused about the last thing, because when he was talking to Dr. Fate and Dr. Fate referred to Vandal Savage's father, I was just like, how can that be? Because of the grandson and the kids and the blah, blah, blah. So we get those answers now. So after the fall of Atlantis, Vandal Savage basically rebuilt his kingdom and rebuilt his empire. Once he rebuilt his empire, he obviously birthed new children. I feel like every single person on the planet has Vandal Savage DNA in them. So, so he rebirthed, he rebirthed everything. And he started like a new place, like a new utopia, like a new kingdom in order to conquer. And he ended up bearing a new child. And and coincidentally enough, his son's name was Nabu. So, and he had the gold helmet that he wore in battle because he was a warrior and a soldier, and that the helmet was his trademark. So his son was very loyal to him. He was a soldier, said he was defending the kingdom. Vandal Savage was still working with Clarion, and there was a moment where Clarion showed up and he brought a starfish with him, the Starrofish, and he used the Starrofish to basically attach itself to all of his soldiers, and it caused a rift and a conflict between all of his soldiers. At first I was just like, is he using the Starrofish to control the soldiers? But then I'm like, you shouldn't have to control them because you're Vandal Savage and you run this. So it was just like a weird thing. Like I still kind of don't understand the point of, aside maybe I guess Clarion was just trying to play a prank and like have fun or whatever. So I don't know. So he did the Starrofish. The Starfish were attaching themselves to certain soldiers. They were fighting other soldiers. And then during that battle, unfortunately, Vandal Savage's son had Nabu. He had passed away and he died during the fight. Now, the Lords of Order watched the whole thing, and they knew that Vandal Savage's first son, the one from Atlantis, he was a good candidate in order to become like a Lord of Order, but instead of actually making him a Lord of Order, they bestowed on him some power. So now, fast forward now with his new son, now that his new son passed away, there was something about him, I guess, that intrigued them more, and they even said in the narration, they said that it could have also been a reason where the Lords of Order were just too afraid themselves to try to get their hands dirty and to try to restore order. So they ended up taking the soul of Vandal Savage's son and they placed it inside of the helmet, and then that's how he became Dr. Fate. And here was something else that they said that I thought was weird. He specifically said in the narration, he said, now that he doesn't have the weakness of his and the restrictions of his mortal vessel, like his mortal body, they put his spirit into the helmet of fate. So I'm just like, okay, so you basically just disrespected like human bodies and like human beings and how we get down. And then he turns around and says, oh, but in order for Nabu to access his true power, he needs a human body host. And I'm like, so first you said the human body was worthless and it was weak and it was holding him back. Now he needs one in order for somebody to access his power. I'm like, okay, yeah. Do we for the Lords of Order, like they need to get it together. So, and then they showed the montage of all the different human hosts and everything that he's had, with Aqualad, Zatanna, Zatara, Kid Flash and everything. So that was kind of cool. They took us through that whole thing. And, because of that, Nabu's sole mission, sole purpose at that point was basically to take down the Lords of Chaos and stop Clarion, who was basically running amok all over, all over society. But at the same time, in his spirit, he's still the son of Vandal Savage, which is why he called him dad when they had their conversation. So now it takes us place after Zatanna ended up witnessing the battle between, Clarion and what was the girl name? I think her name was Girl. Child. That was her name. Girl name was Child. So she witnessed the battle. And then she's talking to Nabu, and then she's just like, "Oh, we need to recruit some people. We got to get." Well, no, she was talking to the black dude. They got the coat and everything. She talked to him. She was just like, "Listen, we need to recruit some people. Child needs to be taken out." And she said, "You already know where I'm going." So she said, "I don't know who you gonna find, but you need to find some people." And then both he and Etrigan, they were just like, "Okay, we'll go find some people." And then he did the thing, and then they disappeared. So then Zatanna ended up taking her and her disciples, her pupils. She took them to the Tower of Fate. And when they ended up in the Tower of Fate, Dr. Fate showed up, and then he was just like, what are you doing here, daughter of Zatara? And then she told him, she was like, listen, like, we need your help in this fight. And he was like, don't lecture me. He's like, I knew what's coming. He's like, I knew what's out there, child. And then she was just like, oh, my disciples and I, like, we can help with the fight and everything. And he was just like, haha, you call this pitiful group of mystical jokers, like, they're disciples. And then she's like, oh, but, she's like, oh, but they could really help. And he was just like, let's put your faith to the test. And then he puts all three of them in three different trials to see if they're ready for the fight that's going to come, to prove their worth and their power, to see if they're ready. 13 went first, and her issue was basically plagued with doubt. He did this thing where he had a puppet version of Blue Beetle, Zatanna, and Gar and Beast Boy. And there was a moment where Gar had said, he was like, oh, you're awesome, 13. That's why I wanted you to join the Outsiders. And then you heard like her conscience, like a voice say, yeah, that's why he breathed a sigh of relief when you said no. And then, Zatanna was just like, oh, she's like, I trusted you. She's like, I love having you as a pupil. And then the same voice is like, yeah, that's why she brought in two other people to replace you as soon as she can get. So her whole thing is just like doubt, saying, and like trust. It's like, she feels like she needs to contribute something. She doesn't feel like she's pulling her weight. She feels like she's a weak link. And she had to fight her way through that. After talking to her lizard friend that's on her shoulder, which the lizard has not been explained yet, she ended up finding the confidence and the courage that she needs, to break through. And then she said that, yes, I am ready for this fight. And, because of that, she passed the trial, and then she went back to the room. Khalid, he got, not only did he get shown his parents, I don't know why his mom was away. He also got shown himself, because apparently, because this is like episode 11, 3 episodes later, now all of a sudden we find out that he's a doctor. So like he was studying to become a doctor, but then he put his doctor studies on hold so he can study the mystic arts. Apparently his mom used to be like a sorcerer, or someone in her family used to be a sorcerer. She married a Muslim person, converted to Islam, and she stopped doing magic. But because she had a child with somebody, where she, like her magical DNA got in his system, so now he tapped into the magical arts. And it was a very weird conversation, because his mom, who was the white woman, was telling him like, oh, stop this foolishness and go back to school. Don't turn your back on your Muslim faith and blah, blah, blah. And then his dad, who's actually like the born, like legitimate Muslim, he was just like, oh, don't worry. He was just like, oh, our son's found his true calling, just like with your family. He's going to be a great magician. He doesn't have time for silly things like going to school and learning how to be a doctor. And then Khalid's whole thing was, I can do both. He's like, with mom, it's like, forget the magic and just become a doctor. With dad, it's like, oh, be a magician, forget the magic. He's like, why does no one believe I can do both at the same time? And he's just like, I'm trying to do both. And then even his own spirit said to him, he was just like, oh, you're tearing us apart. You're choosing this life over this life. We need to pick one. It's like, he was like, we're drowning in your self-doubt. And then, but then like he came through. Khalid spoke to his parents. He told his parents that he can do both. He does have the confidence and the strength to do both, and he will succeed at doing both. And then, he's like, I'm ready for the challenge. And then he passed the trial. Mary was up last, and hers was the most interesting of all, because there was a little girl who was in danger, and she kept saying, save me. And then, Mary used her power to save her. And then she was like, no, not that way. And then she tried to save her from a train. And then, she used the strength of Zeus. And then she was like, no, not that way. The girl was like, say it, say the words. And then Mary was like, I don't want to say it. And then the girl was like, if you don't say it, I'll say it. Shazam! And then, she turned into the Shazam Mary, like character. We find out the reason why Mary stopped being a Shazam and because she was just like, oh, say the word. Mary was like, we don't say that word. But she said that when she was part of the Shazam family, the power basically got to her. Whereas like everybody, they transform into their Shazam powers, and then they go back to being normal, being regular kids at some point. Mary was the only person who was staying as like the Shazam Mary, like 24/7. And it was at a point where the line between where Mary's mind like ends and the Shazam's mind begins was very blurred. It's like it's either one of two things. They were making it seem like either A, Mary was just drunk with the power, or when she transforms into her Shazam actually takes over, like kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Mary was just like, listen, she said, I didn't like the person I was becoming, because she said that she was obsessed with the power. She said, becoming you is a drug, like it's addictive. And she said, I can help people in other ways. I can access the speed of Mercury, the power, the lightning of Zeus, the strength of Achilles or whatever. She said, I can still access those powers without transforming into you and then becoming like someone that I hate, or becoming a bully, or this, that, and the third, or just being like drunk mad with power. Because again, the way they made it seem was almost like the Shazam character had a mind of its own. And, but that actually made the most sense. And I would have liked to have seen that episode, where she kind of like ran amok. And from a Mary standpoint, I hope we're not done with Mary, because her storyline is actually very interesting, from the Shazam side of it. So I do want to see that going forward, but we'll definitely see what happens. So then they all passed the test, they all passed the trials, because she was just like, oh, I can be strong without turning into you. She's like, I'm ready for the challenge. And then she got sent back to the room as well. After Zatanna gave her daddy the I told you so's, Clarion, the witch boy, knocked on Nabu's door. And he was seeking refuge. He wanted to go into the Tower of Fate to hide because Child was coming after him. And before Nabu had a chance to let him in the door, Child showed up. The two of them got into a magical fight, and Child basically killed Clarion. She killed the cat, which removes Clarion from the mortal plane, because everybody has an anchor. That was his anchor. She killed the cat, and now Clarion was gone, and R.I.P. to Clarion, because he was a damn good character. And we'll see, we'll see if Child ends up, taking over going forward. And then they also did a scene where Zatara was talking to Dr. Fate, because we find out that the person narrating the Vandal Savage story the entire time was Nabu, because he was telling the story to Zatara. And Zatara basically ended up talking to him, and then he said that, listen, you need to trust my daughter and you need to accept help. And he was like, I don't need help. And then he was just like, that's not true, because he was like, first of all, when Kent Nelson was your body host, you were part of the Justice Guild or the Justice Society of America. And then he said, now that you've bonded with me, now that we're a team, I convinced you into joining the Justice League. You fought alongside heroes. You were with heroes, like you were a part of heroes. So don't say that like being a hero is not in you, or like being part of a team. Don't say that's not something that you want, because your history has proven otherwise, that you actually need a team and you excel at having the team. And then he was like, what is your point, Zatara? He was like, trust my daughter. He's like, trust my daughter and listen to what she has to say in order to stop Clarion and save the world from what's about to come. And that was it. And thank you for tuning in. So we're about to hit because this is the third episode, so one more episode left. We're about to conclude the Zatanna storyline, which is basically the Vandal Savage story. We're about to conclude that, and we'll see how it ends. Does Clarion come back? Does Child stick around? How does Dr. Fate come together? Does he team up with his daddy? And like I said, share your thoughts below. Let me know what you think, how the final episode ends. Let me know what you think about these characters, who you like, who you don't like, and where everything goes from here. They did more stuff with Beast Boy, and now he's popping pills. I don't understand. I just need answers with this already, because I'm sick of the Beast Boy thing right now. But we did get a cameo from Stargirl, so that was always good. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Click the notification bell, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit me up on Twitter and Instagram, and we will continue to ride this Young Justice, because all DC TV is basically done until January, so Young Justice is all we got until then. Also, for you Marvel fans, we got Hawkeye coming, because he's got one more episode left. We're about to close the book on that too. So thanks for tuning in, guys. So until next time, for some Young Justice action as we complete the finale of the magical arc, I'm out this bitch!